Good afternoon, everybody. Just going to give everybody a couple of minutes to join our webinar here. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Just giving everybody a couple of seconds to get settled, join our webinar, and then we'll get started for today. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Amy Rosenfeld. I am a registered dietitian and the Community Outreach Program Manager at Northern Westchester Hospital, part of Northwell Health. I have with me my RD to be, as we call it in the field, my dietetic intern, Stephanie Lewis.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
So Stephanie and I are here to host Cooking for Reducing Disease Risk, Arthritis, and Inflammation. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. If you've been here for this series before, this is a monthly series that we have here at our Center for Healthy Living at Northern Westchester Hospital. This will be part conversation about chronic disease risk of arthritis and inflammation. What is inflammation? What causes inflammation? And the risk of inflammation to our health. And then conversation about what we can do about it from a kitchen perspective, how we can eat more anti-inflammatory foods, what causes pro-inflammatory states food-wise, and demonstrate a couple of recipes for you today. Just some business. If you have any questions while we are cooking and chatting, you can definitely put them in the chat. Stephanie and I will be taking a look at that, and we'll be trying to answer as many questions as we can in real time. If you pre-submitted questions, we did see a bunch of those. We're going to try to address as many of them as we possibly can. If you're cooking along with us, we welcome you too. You should have all received recipes in your email inbox. From an email address, chl@northwell.edu. If you didn't, for any reason, you can either put your name and email address in the chat or email us at chl@northwell.edu. We'll be sure to get a copy of those recipes over for you today, so you can try them tonight or this weekend at your convenience. And last but not least, there will be a survey at the end of this program that pops up automatically on your screen as soon as the webinar ends. We ask you please kindly, it's very, very short, to fill out the survey. The survey allows us to continue providing these programs for free, to support our grant funding and our supportive funding for these programs. And your feedback is also important to us. So please take the time to fill out the survey. And without further ado, I'm going to spotlight my screen so everybody can really see the presentation here and see what I'm chatting about as we go along. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about today arthritis and inflammation, what exactly that means, and what anti-inflammatory foods are to focus on, and some foods that are thought to increase inflammation or be pro-inflammation, as we call it in the nutrition world, and then how to put these recommendations into action, as well as some cooking demos about halfway through and towards the end. All right. If you are going to be cooking along with us, we're going to be making 2 recipes today. Actually, technically 3. We're going to be making avocado pudding and a granola topping for that. So a dessert today, which is always nice to mix things up. And we're going to be making baked fish and chips. So a really exciting way to enjoy fish, especially if you're new to eating fish, in a healthier way, as a little bit of a comfort food makeover, which if you've seen me in the kitchen before, you know that's my style. Okay, so arthritis and inflammation, right? Inflammation, when we talk about that, it's a very common word that's thrown around now. It's something that you'll hear doctors talking about, news shows talking about, and what exactly is it? So inflammation isn't always a bad thing. Inflammation is our body's natural response to an injury or an illness, and it's basically our immune system activating to respond to that. our little army of invaders in our bodies, or little army helps to fight in these invaders and create what's called an inflammatory response to either heal the injury or heal the infection. And that's a good thing in small amounts. What we call that in the medical world, that's an acute response, a short response to help treat what's going on, heal you, and move on. So that's what inflammation is. It's just an immune system response. The problem is that sometimes inflammation isn't turning off, right? It's not an acute response. It's not a short response that your body is activating to quickly heal you and then go away. And when it doesn't go away and it's a constant immune response, that's called chronic inflammation. And that's what we're seeing, what research is showing, what physicians are saying is what can be dangerous. You don't, and potentially have a lot of increased risk for chronic disease and cause chronic conditions. So we don't want our bodies to constantly be having these immune responses. Arthritis is an example of one of those chronic inflammatory responses, as well as many other diseases can cause that, such as diabetes is a very common one. And there are many foods that are thought to help fight inflammation, not take it away or cure yourself of inflammation, but really help to improve inflammatory responses, help to alleviate symptoms for arthritis, for example, improve joint pain and other swelling and types of symptoms you might be experiencing. Now, out there in the media, there's a lot of buzz around anti-inflammatory diets. You'll hear about that probably on every news channel, magazine, Instagram post, anywhere you go. I'll caution you to say that not all anti-inflammatory diets out there are created equal. And what I mean by that is they're not all backed by science. As registered dietitians, or RDs to be, here in this program, we're going to be explaining two evidence-based options. That means that there's research showing correlations, connections between the foods that we are recommending and reducing inflammatory symptoms or inflammatory markers, such as CRP, reactive protein, which is a blood level that your doctor may routinely test you for to see what inflammatory levels you have, or if you have inflammation in your body. So these two evidence-based options that we're going to recommend to you today that have been shown to be anti-inflammatory are plant-based diets and the Mediterranean diet. And I hate the D word. If you've seen me here before, I hate it. Think of it as plant-based lifestyle eating, plant-based Mediterranean style eating. But the D word is where it resonates for all of us mostly. Okay, so what does it mean to be plant-based? Plant-based is an eating pattern that focuses on foods primarily from plants. So when we talk about that, we mean fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, oils, whole grains, legumes, and beans. So things that are completely sourced from non-animal products, things that are growing from plants. And this is more commonly now referred to as plant-based, but when you are entirely plant-based, we refer to that as vegan. That's the way we used to really think of that term. That means that you are entirely plant-based and no animal products are part of your rotation of foods. If you're vegetarian, it means that you eat a plant-based diet that is a diet that's mostly plant-based, but you may also eat some elements of dairy, fish, and or eggs. And there are different variations on that as well. Some vegetarians only eat dairy, only eat eggs, only eat fish, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's flexitarian, which means you're vegetarian sometimes, right? You're vegetarian sometimes occasionally you'll have meat and animal products. You will have poultry, red meat, pork, things of that nature, but most of the time you are following a vegetarian plant-based diet. And then there's plant forward, which is something that is really more commonly coming into circulation now. That is a type of eating lifestyle that you emphasize plant-based foods as your primary way of eating, but you're not restricted to them. Meat might be included sometimes, but it's not the focus of the meal. So if you're not ready to go full force into vegan or plant-based, but you really, really want to try to incorporate this based on what you're going to hear today, plant forward might be the option for you. That's the way I personally practice and eat and encourage my family to eat, where we are mostly plant-based, but we are not restricted to that. We incorporate eggs into our diet and chicken and fish. But whenever we plate something for ourselves, whenever we eat, the focus on the majority of the foods on our plate are from plants. So the Mediterranean diet is maybe one of the oldest and the most, one of the most studied forms of eating, been shown to be correlated with reducing the risk of heart disease, reducing the risk of diabetes. Study after study show that populations from the Mediterranean definitely have a reduced risk of chronic disease in the long term. Mediterranean diet essentially is focused on an abundance of plant-based foods, like we mentioned before. It's a focus on using olive oil as your principal source of fat. You do consume some dairy products on this, but in very small, low to moderate amounts, and definitely the unsweetened variety when it comes to yogurt. So limiting sugar and using very, very little added sugars into your diet. Fish and poultry would be the main source of animal products consumed, again, in very small portions as part of your meal, and maybe just a few times a week at most. Red meat, which includes beef and pork, I always like to make that clear to people, very infrequently, and if at all, very small amounts as your portion size, smaller than the palm of your hand as one portion in circumference and thickness. Like to make that clear for people too. And like I mentioned, sweets definitely very much to a minimum. This would be not fruit. Fruit is recommended in abundance, but things that would have added sugar to it. So things like, sugar sweetened beverages like sodas, adding honey or maple syrup, even though they are natural sources, would be in very small amounts. And other dessert items like pastries, cookies, treats, things like that. And some of you might be happy to hear the Mediterranean diet also, if your doctor says it's okay, include wine in very small amounts. 4 ounces would be considered a portion size. To include a portion with meals would be acceptable, and it's evidence-based on this style of eating. So what's the science behind these 2 different meal plans, and why is it shown to be helpful in reducing inflammation? They both show to reduce what we call chronic inflammatory markers like CRP, the blood level I described before, and your experience of inflammation. So symptoms of inflammation, joint pain, swelling, discomfort in any way. There is correlational studies, not causational studies. That means if you follow a Mediterranean diet, it is not going to cure your inflammation, but there's a lot of evidence to say that it may help. A connection, a correlation. Studies also show that these diets protect against diseases linked to inflammation. So if you have a pro-inflammatory state, whether it's from arthritis or something else, that when you follow these diets and reduce your level of inflammation, you're also reducing your risk of other chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, all connected, correlated with high states of inflammation. And I think as more and more research comes out, we're really going to understand this more and more, and how we, especially in America, can help to use our diet and preventative measures to reduce inflammation and therefore our risk for chronic disease. So when you think about inflammatory diets in a nutshell, you want to think about why plant-based and Mediterranean diets work. It's because they are really, really rich in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, particularly a form of antioxidant called phytochemicals, and fiber. And all of these diets, for all of these reasons, it really has been shown to be correlated with a reduced risk for inflammation. More specifically, if you want to think about a list, some of you ask for a list, anti-inflammatory foods are the following: colorful, and when I say colorful, vibrant fruits, vegetables, and herbs in abundance. Okay. Some of you asked in your pre-submitted questions about not only reducing inflammation, but reducing sodium intake. When you season and flavor your foods with herbs, it's going to help to give your body not only tons of nutrients, but taste and enjoyment of your food. Nuts and seeds, whole grains, so not just, whole wheat bread, but whole grains in their natural form. Brown rice, popcorn, air pop popcorn, barley, quinoa, oatmeal, things in their natural state rather than a processed grain. The more vitamins and minerals, and the better for you. Fish, particularly a fatty source of fish, like a fish fillet. We're going to talk a little bit about that a couple times a week. Vegetable-based oils, and I would caution you to limit coconut in that regard. Coconut oil, as it is definitely something you want to eat more seldomly than, say, an olive oil. Legumes, which would include beans, lentils, peas, and tea. Speak to your doctor about caffeine levels and what's right for you, but definitely tea has been shown to be on the anti-inflammatory list. Pro-inflammatory foods, so that means foods correlated with increased inflammation. These are foods that include the following. So refined carbohydrates, that means white bread, white rice, white breads and white rices, they don't exist in nature. They are processed foods that are made to be that way to increase shelf stability. So pastries, breads, things using white flour. We actually are going to use a little bit of white flour today, but in very small amounts. Things that are devoid of fiber is where you're really going to see a increased risk. Fried foods, so deep fried foods that are using submergence in oil, fast foods, fries, chicken fingers, things of that nature. Sugar and sugar sweetened drinks like soda, even natural juices. Red meats, this would include red meats and pork, as well as processed meats, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, other breakfast related meats, deli meats. These are all thought to increase inflammation, as well as processed fat sources like margarine, shortening, and lard. So those are a couple of different lists to kind of get you started, but we really are going to focus today on different ways to think about how you can integrate in healthier anti-inflammatory foods into your kitchen. And we're going to start with that with our first cooking demo. I'm going to remove my spotlight to make sure that you can see both of our, see the recipe on me, and take it over to Stephanie. So Stephanie's going to demo for us avocado pudding, which is a really nice all natural recipe to still indulge your sweet tooth without adding any added sugar. So Stephanie, take it away.
Thanks for having me today, Amy. So today I'm going to make avocado pudding with a quick granola and some berries on top. I love this recipe because traditional puddings, granolas, and any desserts in general usually come loaded with sugars and sweeteners, which can cause a lot of inflammation throughout your body. So it's hard to just, give up your after dinner snack. So we decided to come up with a recipe. So it's filled with lots of whole foods and anti-inflammatory compounds. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with the granola because it takes a little bit more time than the avocado pudding. So today for the granola, you're going to need 1 ripe banana, 4 dates, a cup of rolled oats, some cinnamon, vanilla, and chopped walnuts. So start off by preheating your oven to 350 degrees. And I'm going to place the banana and the dates into the food processor. And I'm going to combine it until it's like an even consistency. So I'll rip up the bananas just a little bit.
Stephanie, is the banana a ripe banana, or can it also be overripe? Like, is it a good way to use up like a banana that's like too ripe maybe to eat as a snack, or should it be just ripe?
Right. So bananas are a great snack for arthritis, and they have tons of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. They can all aid in the body in like fighting off oxidative stress. And if you let your bananas sit out for a little while, they'll eventually get these little black spots on them. And that's when the sugars come out and they become extra sweet. So using foods with the vitamins and minerals and everything intact, and all the fiber is a great way to add sweetness to your food instead of adding inflammatory sweeteners, refined sweeteners and stuff like that. So that's why we're also going to use some dates today. And we'll use
if the banana's like got a little extra black spots, it means it's going to be sweeter for this recipe, and that's a good thing.
Right. So all the sugars are going to pop out, and it's going to taste even sweeter. So if your bananas are, brand new and still a little bit of green, you can add an extra date or two in, because the dates give a lot of sweetness.
Okay.
So I'm going to blend this really quick. I'm going to turn off my noise so you guys don't have to listen to this, and I'll be right back in 1 minute.
Sure. I'm going to address some of the questions in the chat here. The cocoa powder, ideally, it's a good question. Is it sweetened or unsweetened? We ideally want it to be unsweetened because we're going to control the added sugars ourselves. So it's a good question. Always want to purchase unsweetened versions of things, including cocoa powder. And the quality of your ingredients when you pick things matters. So dark, rich cocoa powder, 70%, for example, dark cocoa would give you like a really rich taste. You want to have a high quality cocoa powder if you can. And then Stephanie, there's a question here. Is there any substitute for banana that you would recommend if you have a problem with bananas, or
Yes.
any dried fruit substitution?
Right. Yes, there actually is. So if you're not a huge fan of bananas, you don't like the flavor, or you have some sort of issue where you cannot consume bananas, applesauce will work in this. And it's roughly a cup of applesauce to a banana.
Okay. Unsweetened applesauce.
Unsweetened applesauce. That's right. And the nice thing about this recipe is this is for 1 to 2 servings, but you can always double it, and you can make larger batches as you go if you want to store them and keep them on the shelf. So now I'm going to take the remaining ingredients that we talked about, and I'm going to add them to the bowl. So I have oats here. I have vanilla extract, which vanilla extract contains vanillin, which is a plant compound. And the research shows that it's a powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory property. And this compound can also be found in rice bran or clove oil. So we'll add that to our bowl.
It also makes things taste sweeter.
It does, and delicious. And then we have cinnamon. So cinnamon is a powerhouse of a spice, and it has something called formaldehyde in it, and it gives it the smell and the flavor, but also helps reduce inflammation throughout the entire body. And it's great if you have any comorbidities like diabetes. It's great for circulation and stuff like that. So we'll add the cinnamon to the bowl. And then lastly, I have the walnuts here, and the walnuts are packed with what we call omega-3 fatty acids, which are polyunsaturated fats, and they're responsible for bringing down the inflammation in your body. And as always, if you have any allergies to nuts, feel free to replace them with any seeds you enjoy, especially chia seeds or hemp seeds, because that will also give you that omega-3 punch too, which is anti-inflammatory. I'm going to take this now mixture that I created, which is basically our wet ingredients, and dump it into the bowl with the oat mixture.
So in there is the banana
and the
dates.
Right.
Okay.
And it makes this nice little wet concoction to mix in with the oat ingredients. And what you want to do here is make sure everything is mixed in really well. Get all the oats nice and wet so that they have all the flavorings and sweetness on them.
So there's a question in the chat, which I'll address. Cinnamon, is there a brand to look for? Really, without recommending specific brands, looking for organic versions of cinnamon can definitely be a good choice. If you're looking for avoidance of fillers of spices, you could even take cinnamon stick if you are so bold and grind it yourself, especially if you have a really high quality blender. But looking for an organic version should be just fine. There are also at the farmers markets natural or really great local spice brands that come to the farmers markets in Westchester, New York. At least I'm not sure where you're viewing from, but a lot of farmers markets these days, people are making and providing their own spices, and that would be a good option too.
All right, so next we're just gonna take all that mixture, dump it out of the bowl and put it in a parchment lined pan. And here you're gonna spread it out pretty thin and evenly, because as the granola cooks, it's supposed to dry out a little bit and crystallize with a little bit of sugar on it. So you wanna make sure that you have a nice thin layer so the moisture doesn't sit in on the oats and cook it to an oatmeal consistency instead of a drier consistency like granola. So from here, we're gonna place it in the oven, and it's gonna go in for roughly 35 minutes, but it's really important that we're gonna stir it, or pick it up and move it around so we can get all the moisture and the water out of it. So we'll do that every 10 minutes while it's cooking. So I'll place it in there now. And then just make sure that you let it cool and harden for 10 to 15 minutes so that the mixture can dry out and harden, and then serve the mixture. It can last in an airtight container for about like 5 to 7 days. So next I'm going to move on to the avocado pudding. So for this, you're going to need. Just
quickly, 1 second, the question in the chat. Yes, that was parchment paper. She's using parchment paper.
Oh yeah, parchment paper. Yep. So for this, we're going to need 8 dates. And I like to use them at jewel dates, but sometimes if they're not available and you want to use the deglet dates, I kind of just double it up. So if I use deglet, I'll do 16 dates. And you're going to want to use 2 tablespoons of dark, pure chocolate chips. So if you can't find them, it's totally understandable, but I like to use the pure dark chocolate chips. So they're just like these little thin chocolate chips here. And there's just cocoa in them. And then 1.5 cups of water. It could be 1 to 1.5. And you're going to want to reserve that water that's been soaked in the dates. 1 large avocado, or you can use 2 small ones, 2.5 tablespoons, sorry, I didn't put that there, of cocoa powder, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So we're going to start out by soaking the dates and the chocolate chips together. I pre-did this because you do it for roughly 30 minutes, or if you want to do it overnight, you can soak them and put them in the refrigerator. So the dark chocolate chips and the cocoa powder in this, in their purest form, without any added sugars or fillers like that are in candy, contain a compound called flavonoids, which are extremely anti-inflammatory, and they help your blood circulate. So we would drain these dates and set aside 1 cup to 1.5 cups of the liquid, depending on the size of your avocado. So today I couldn't get a huge avocado, so it's like a medium large avocado. So I did 1 cup of liquid, and I actually have it all here. So I'm just gonna dump it straight into the food processor without draining anything.
And Stephanie, there's a question. Do you find those chocolate chips easily in a grocery store, or did you have to special order them online?
Oh no, I find them in almost any grocery store that I shop in. So it's easy to find that. And if you cannot find that, you can just double up on the pure cocoa powder. I just like the consistency that the chocolate chip gives us. Yeah. So we're gonna put the reserve water in here, and then it's good to use, if you forget and you dump the water out, it's fine, but it's really good to use that water because, as you can see, it's a little dark brown, and a lot of the sweetness sits into that water overnight. So we're gonna add the rest of the ingredients into the food processor. And I thought I pre-popped this out. So you'll use a ripe avocado. And avocados are a great choice because they contain carotenoids, which are an antioxidant that help lower inflammation in the body. So it's a great substitute that, other than using a whole bunch of dairy as your pudding base. Pop that seed out. Get all the avocado in there. Perfect. And then next we're going to add some more vanilla, and like we talked about before, all of its anti-inflammatory properties. Sorry, I have avocado all over my hands.
That's okay. Stephanie, can we tilt it down so we can see your hands?
My dirty hands. Yep.
Thank you.
again, the flavonoids from the cocoa powder. So 2 tablespoons of the cocoa powder. And then I'm going to turn on that food processor once again. So I'm going to mute you and leave it to Amy for a second.
Yeah, no problem. So if you're a pudding person like me, I'm definitely a chocolate person. Chocolate is my kryptonite, but it's also my delight to enjoy because rich dark chocolate is full of antioxidants, and in very small portions is actually very nutritious to include in your diet. Helps to satisfy those sweet tooth cravings. And this recipe in particular, I happen to love chocolate pudding. It's one of my favorite things. So this is a really nice way to indulge in enjoy, as we all should. There's nothing wrong with having sweet treats in our diet. I don't believe in good foods or bad foods. I believe in sometimes foods and everyday foods. And this is like a really nice mix of the two worlds, because I would consider this an everyday food while also being a dessert. So I'm excited for this one.
All right. So now that we have it all blended, it comes to like a nice, great pudding consistency. And I would say that when you're using your liquid, you can monitor how much you need. So if you want to set the liquid aside and not just dump it all in like I did, you can dump it in like 3/4 of a cup at first and see what consistency that you actually like of your pudding. I'm going to plate it up here so you could see what it looks
Stephanie,
like.
there's a really good question in the chat here. If you have chronic kidney disease, of course, your doctor will recommend you to reduce potassium in your diet. Applesauce is a great substitution recommended for banana. Is there a substitution for the avocado, since avocado is so high in potassium too?
That is a good question, actually. You know what? Not that I have ever made or looked into, but that is something that I think that we should look into. So as of right now, no, I don't know of a good substitution of avocado in avocado pudding, but I'd like to.
You know what, for that person, if you wanted to put in the chat, and I see you private messaged us, you can private message us your email and let us think on that one a little while as a substitution to give it the same consistency without the potassium.
And so with the magic of TV, the granola is automatically done and dried out and perfect. So I'm just going to take that granola and top it on top of the pudding.
It looks so good.
Yeah.
And you can put whatever toppings you want, right? You said
right.
granola
I like to add berries because they're packed with anthocyanins, which give them that bright color, and they're also antioxidants and super anti-inflammatory. So I'm just going to top some berries on top. And here you have a nice whole food, plant-based recipe that you can eat without guilt for dinner.
Looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Looks beautiful. Thank you so much for
you
that.
can either refrigerate it or eat it right away.
Yeah. Living my life, eat dessert first.
Right.
Yeah. I would go first, or all together.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot to say for dessert just being a part of our meal, like a side dish, to not give it that special shout out. That's something to look forward to. It actually increases sugar cravings when you train children to, if you finish your plate, then you can get this. In our house, if my children ask for dessert, it's just part of our meal, like a side dish. Like they'll have a cookie with the rest of their meal. So it kind of takes away that mystification, that looking forward to it. Yes, exactly.
I should train my brain to do that.
Works for adults too, for sure. All right, so let's keep going. So when you're thinking about eating anti-inflammatory, that was a really nice example of what we're going to try to focus on, which is whole foods, and focusing on vegetables and fruits and vegetables being the focus. So when you think about, how can I implement this in my kitchen? You want to think about your plant-based foods, particularly your vegetables, but also your fruits, are your main focus. That meat or fish or whatever other protein you have, like that's your side dish. You may have heard me say this before in the Zoom room. Vegetables are the main dish. They are not the side dish. So kind of reframing your perspective a little bit. use of olive oil as your main source of cooking and fats, eating nuts and seeds and integrating nuts and seeds anywhere you possibly can, whether it be as a topper or as a snack or as a substitution. We're going to talk a lot about that. Adding fish into your diet, into your meals, your family rotation a couple times a week. Adding legumes maybe 3 times a week as a minimum to start, and really to switch out and to focus on whole grains wherever you can. So to break this down a little bit more, let's start with fruits and vegetables and herbs. Really want to think about herbs as not this afterthought. I love to incorporate fresh herbs into salads, for example, fresh dill, fresh basil, parsley. It gives salads such a nice, refreshing taste and just burst of flavor to add that in. So cooking it in not only into our cooking as a topper or as something we're mixing in into soups and stews and protein dishes and vegetable dishes, but also just directly into salads like any other lettuce. It's just a mini lettuce. So starting with parsley might be a good place to start, or starting with basil. It's going to soon be summer and all of our deliciousnesses will be upon us. And just think of plentiful fruits and vegetables throughout the day. If it helps you to have the framework of eating the rainbow, making sure you check off all your different colors, it's a really great way to think about it. In particular, I mean, Stephanie really highlighted a lot of our rich choices for antioxidants, but I'll also highlight tomatoes, dark green leafy vegetables, dark green vegetables, the darker, the better. Citrus as well. And she talked about berries. These are really plentiful in all the anti-inflammatory properties. And think about preparing our vegetables in really interesting ways. You know, you may not like a vegetable raw, but you may really enjoy it roasted. You may not like it plain, but you may really like it marinated. So trying different options, braised, pureed, mixing into things. You may not taste it, but it's still incorporated in, air fried or baked in the oven, caramelized on the stovetop. Like caramelized means just creating the sugars, right? So really bringing the sugars out. So grilling pineapple, for example, and adding it into cooking really accentuates the sweetness of the pineapple. So get creative and get excited about trying new things and incorporating plentiful fruits and vegetables into your diet. In terms of whole grains and healthy fats, as we mentioned, snacking on nuts and seeds, substituting out, say, butter or other spreads like, say, or jam, things like that. Substituting in some nut butters, nut and seed butters could be a really nice way to add some more protein, healthy fat, and also give you a more sustainable meal. I also incorporate nut butters into smoothies and baking and anywhere that I can, really, even savory dishes. My family loves peanut sauce to have with tofu or chicken, or it's a delicious sauce to incorporate in. Nut flours into baking. I often will substitute out half of all-purpose flour or half of even whole grain flour to add almond flour, to add more protein and to add more nutrition into my baking recipes. As we mentioned with Stephanie's recipe, incorporating avocado into wherever you can, meals and snacks. It's a great substitute for mayonnaise, for example. Really nice introduction into reducing the dairy and going more plant-based. Chia and flaxseed, as Stephanie mentioned, preferably ground flaxseed, both really rich in omega-3s, which is an essential fatty acid that you cannot get unless you eat it. Our bodies don't give it to us. We can't get it from any other places except for specific food sources, one of which was walnuts that we use today, and the other's fish, which we're about to cook with. And using healthy oils, particularly olive oil, as I mentioned, but also other oils listed here on the screen: canola, peanut, sunflower oil, sesame, avocado oils as your main cooking fats and salad dressing fats. And really trying to use as many whole grains into your diet as you possibly can. This might mean a gradual switch. This might be mixing half white rice with half brown rice. You might have heard me say before, I often will make for my family I like to make fried rice for my little children. They love it. And I'll make a multigrain fried rice. So they love brown rice, but they're not so happy about quinoa and some other things. So I mix it all together. And when I mix it together, they're very excited to eat it. So it doesn't have to be just a serving of barley or a serving of quinoa. Mix it up and gradually increase to that or switch to that. Doesn't have to be all at once. Protein, a really nice way to start. Substitute out meat for fish twice a week. Make it a goal. Maybe start with once, and try different options: seared, grilled, or baked fish fillets. Shellfish is also perfectly fine. We used to think that shrimp and crab and lobster, if you can incorporate that, we used to think those were all bad for you, that they were high in cholesterol, but we now know that's absolutely not true. And it's perfectly fine to incorporate shellfish into the rotation. It's very affordable, especially shrimp, convenient because it can be frozen and quickly made for a meal for one or a fast weeknight meal. Same thing with frozen fish fillets. I always have like a bag of individually wrapped frozen tilapia, things like that, cod in my freezer, so I can make a quick weeknight fish dinner without having to have gone to the fish store. So those are all good options as well. If you're interested in learning about different types of fish, like what's safe from a mercury perspective or what's good in your area, I highly recommend going on the website from the Monterey Bay Aquarium called Seafood Watch, and they have different guides for different parts of the country, different sects of the the Northeast, but also specifically to New York, for example, of what's healthy now, because it changes constantly. Is it better to get local? Is it better to get farm raised? Is it better to get fresh fish or fresh catch? Really, that's a really good guide because it's changing constantly from a mercury perspective and a sustainability perspective. So Seafood Watch definitely Google that. And try incorporating legumes as, again, a substitute for animal products, such as beans, lentils, peas, a minimum of 3 times a week, and try putting them in different areas of your cooking, whether it's salads, pureeing it to make a dip, such as a hummus, soups and stews, chilies, for example, can very easily sub out all the meat or at least half the meat for some beans, mixing them into your grain dishes or your rice dishes. And think about simple things of how you can reinvent your classics, like a chili, to be plant-based. How can I take away the meat sometimes, maybe not all the time, to make it a more plant-focused meal? And then reducing the pro-inflammatory foods. They mentioned transitioning to whole grains from the processed grains, switching out the fried food in your diet to air fried options, which is exactly what I'm going to demo in a second, to have that crunchy, satisfying fried taste without all of that pro-inflammatory oils and the deep fried qualities, which are high in calories and not healthy for us for many reasons. Focusing on drinking water and seltzer, unsweetened beverage options, teas, caffeinated or herbal if you can help, if you can't have the caffeine. Gradually reduce added sugars, choosing unsweetened varieties of things, making sure to use, as Stephanie showed us, plant-based ways to sweeten your options, but always saying, what can I buy that's the unsweetened version of this? So not sweetened cocoa powder, but unsweetened cocoa powder. How can I use fruit as my sweet choice? Maybe, one of my favorite go-tos is just a bowl of strawberries with dark chocolate chips, and I'm very happy and very satisfied. And gradually reducing some of these pro-inflammatory foods, and really say to yourself, I really enjoy a steak. I'm going to save that for a special treat. And that's perfectly fine. Or I really enjoy, a white chocolate chip cookie. No one's saying you can't have those things again. If you're looking to reduce inflammation, it's all about reduction, not elimination. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next cooking demo, which is a baked fish and chips. I am choosing this recipe for many reasons. The first is because a lot of us don't particularly like fish. And I myself taught myself to like fish when I was in my early 20s. I didn't like it growing up, and I had to find ways to like it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to like all types of fish. You don't have to like baked salmon. Stephanie and I were joking this week that neither of us like baked salmon, and that's fine. But we like other forms of fish, right? And we enjoy it. And this is a very nice introductory way to enjoy fish in a very healthy and nutritious way. I'm going to tilt my screen down, and we're going to start with the chip, which is French fry option. I'm going to show you how to cut your potatoes to make a perfect homemade French fry. So I washed and I scrubbed these potatoes. The recipe calls for using russet potatoes, but they weren't looking really good in the store today. So I'm using Yukon Gold, and that's perfectly fine too. When you are cutting a French fry, it's all about, you don't have to be precise in your cutting, but you definitely want to try to get the shape of fry that you want to emulate that. So I like kind of not a shoestring fry. I don't like a super thin fry. It's somewhere in between. So I'm going to cut these potatoes kind of in slices here to start it out that way. And then I'm going to take it in half so I don't slip and slide from a knife perspective. So I have layers cut, and then I'm going to cut it again into my thicker matchstick shape. And as you notice, I'm leaving the skin on because that's where all the nutrition and the fiber is. So I've made French fries that are about that thickness and that shape and consistency. Again, you can do it however you want, whatever shape you prefer. What were you going to say, Stephanie?
I said that looks like a perfect French fry.
Well, as dietitians, we do a lot of knife skills.
Right.
Which is a very important element of cooking. That would be a good one day to do here. All right.
Right.
Okay. So there we go. Got our perfect French fries, as Stephanie complimented me with. And I have my lined baking sheet with parchment paper. I sprayed it with cooking spray because you definitely want to make sure these don't stick. This off to the side here. I'm going to spread them in an even layer. I'm going to tilt it so you can really see there we go. Spread it in an even layer, and I'm going to toss it with, I'm using peanut oil, but you can use whatever oil you want, canola oil, something that's definitely of oil that can take the heat. And toss it. I use my hands because I think hands are the best cooking tools. And I have my oven set to 425 for this. I'm going to spread this in an even layer here. Grab a towel to dry my hands from the oil. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of salt, just a touch for flavor. You could also season with whatever seasoning you want. Say you like spicy fries, season with spicy fries. You could do paprika if you can't have salt at all. Lots of different options. These are going to go into my oven, and I'm going to put them at 425 for 30 minutes, but I'm going to toss them with kitchen safe tongs every 10 minutes so that they are constantly turning over. And I'm going to put these on the bottom rack because I'm going to put the fish on the middle rack. All right, so for the fish here, the potatoes, potatoes get a really bad reputation. They get a bad reputation because they are high in carbs. They are white, and therefore white promotes inflammation. But you know what? A real potato, not a processed French fry, not a fry that comes from the freezer. A whole potato, perfectly healthy and rich in potassium. So for
Amy, would this work with sweet potatoes as well?
For sure. You could definitely do it for sweet potatoes as well. I definitely think that would be a good option. With sweet potatoes, I might season with cinnamon.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so I was just getting my fish out of the freezer. So as you can, or the refrigerator, because it was defrosted. So as you can see, it's in the individual package. This is a cod fillet. All right, so this is like a really nice meal that you can make even just for one person or for the whole family. And cod is a nice choice for a couple of reasons. One, it's a firm fish. So it's a fish that has a nice texture. It's not super flaky. It's not super fishy. It has more of a chicken-like consistency, a little firmer. And it's works really well and is really well accepted for that, like if you're new to fish. So cod is a great choice, any white fish really, but cod is a good one and it's very affordable. So you're going to do 3, you see I have my stations here. I'm going to do 3 dips. So the first dip I'm going to do with this one is in white flour. And as we were having this conversation, I realized I could have substituted this for a nut flour. I could have dipped it in almond flour. It would have been just as nice and maybe give it a little more nutrition. So you can always push yourself to think of new ways to improve. So I'm dipping this in white all-purpose flour and just like making sure it's on all sides. You really want to dredge it so it's a nice even layer. And then you're going to dip it in the egg. Coat here. And then you're going to dip it in cornflakes. And we were talking about cornflakes before we got started, Stephanie and I, and not all cornflakes are created equal. You know, I didn't get traditional cornflake brand. I went and I looked for a cereal that was essentially just corn in the ingredients. And this is going to simulate that crunchiness from fried food without deep frying it. You know, traditional fish and chips, it is deep fried fish, which when you do that, you're reducing your omega-3s significantly, which is one of the main reasons you're eating the fish. And so this is going to help preserve that. So as you can see, I have really gotten it on all sides. Slide this out of the way. And I've put it on a baking sheet. As you can see, I'm just going to, for food safety reasons, wash my hands. On a baking sheet that's layered with a cooling rack. And this is a trick that you can use when you want to simulate fried food, because it's going to create air circulation on all sides. Nothing is going to get soggy. And nobody likes a soggy piece of fried anything, right? So you want to try to simulate that crunchiness by putting a cooling rack on top of the baking tray. And I've sprayed the cooling rack with cooking spray as well, so nothing sticks. I'm then going to take some more cooking spray. I'm going to spray the outside of my fish on both sides. And that's going to give me even more of that crunchy taste we're all looking for. I'm going to put that in the middle rack of my oven and cook that for about 20 minutes. So that's why I did the fries first. You see, they're both going to come out at the exact same time. One tray meal. And then I'm just going to plate this up for you because you can see what it looks like. Because of course, the magic of television, we have it ready and done for you. And so this I would serve with like a big, healthy green salad or your favorite vegetables. You have your fish and chips.
That looks fantastic.
Thank you. Fish and chips, but you can see the French fries still, I kind of don't know if you can tell the difference between them being fried or air fried. And the fish is definitely firm and crunchy on all sides.
Looks restaurant quality to me.
Thank you. Definitely give me my lunch. And let me see if there are any other questions here in the chat. I don't know if I'm seeing any other ones. I don't think I'm seeing any other ones, but I think that our combination here, Stephanie, of our avocado pudding and our fish and chips would be an absolutely delicious dinner for tonight or lunch for tomorrow, and a great option. So thank you all. If there are no other questions, I'll give it like another second, make sure no other questions come through. But if there are no other questions, we hope that today's program really helped you to see and learn a little bit about inflammation, some foods that can help reduce your inflammation, kind of demystify the, some of the things you might be hearing out there, and give you some options to get you started. I see in the chat, there is a question. Did you fry the potatoes? Nope, everything is baked. Everything is baked. I see some people saying that they may have some hesitancy around cooking sprays. Listen, I understand that. You can also use a mister, put oil in a mister yourself and spray it, and then it's just using physics to create your own homemade spray. So you definitely could do that if that's something you caution against using a pre-made spray. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for your kudos in the chat. We definitely appreciate all of your thoughts. And when this program ends, a survey will automatically pop up on your screen as soon as you close the webinar. So we ask you to please fill it out. I see some people asking for a copy of the presentation for the list. I think we can do that. It's an online presentation. I can send you the link to that so you can see it. And Stephanie, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Always nice to have you here. Great job. All right, everyone, have a fantastic weekend. Bye.